And as everyone is rolling in, I'll do a quick introduction of myself here, and then I'm going to put something in the chat that I think will be pretty helpful. My name is Adam Sokol. I'm a content strategist here at Pluralsight, and what we're talking about today is using 2021 industry data to succeed in the new year. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at Pluralsight's 2022 tech forecast, what I'm going to do is just put it in our chat here. This is going to be the PDF version, so you can take a look at that. And that is going to be in the chat to everyone. You can look at that. Some of the stats that I'll be referencing today while I chat with Neil will be right from that report. So I wanted to put that in there so anyone can take a look at that in the chat. As we go throughout our conversation, if you have questions for Neil or myself on anything we discuss, feel free to put them in the chat as well. I will track that. So we're going to get started here. And I think the first thing I should do is introduce Neil. So Neil Davis is with British Telecom. He is a portfolio and curriculum manager there. And he and their company has been closely connected to Pluralsight for a little while here. They use a couple of our products, and we're really excited to tell their story. And what I'll do is I'll give some kind of industry data throughout, but more importantly, I'm a firm believer in giving real life examples on how products and services can help teams and organizations succeed. So what we're going to do first off, Neil, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Adam.
And so the way that I'd love to kind of start our conversation and kick this off is, would you mind giving our audience and myself just a little bit of an introduction to how your organization uses Pluralsight in general?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been using Pluralsight for probably around about 2 years. I've been with British Telecom since November of 2020, so not quite that 2-year duration. But we transformed the way we used it probably at the beginning of January last year, in so much that instead of giving open access to our tech learners, what we do is we work with the team managers, we work with the SMEs within the business, and we create curated learning pathways. And those curated learning pathways then form part of what we call our skills center. And we'll probably talk about that in a little bit more depth later on. But essentially, we do have a few open accesses to Pluralsight where we've got people who are on there and taking their own learning in their own time, but generally it's all around curated learning pathways.
And I know you said that you kind of joined on a little bit after the company had actually started using Pluralsight, but are you aware of what problems the company was trying to solve when they added on, or rather, when you adjusted your planning with it last year, what problems you were trying to solve?
Well, it wasn't so much a problem as such. It was more a case of the ramp up of the need for cloud skills was our driver for adopting Pluralsight. The whole ethos around bringing Pluralsight into BT Enterprise, which is the customer-facing unit of BT that I work for, was that we would build what we called a cloud academy at that time, and that was working with one of Pluralsight's skills strategists to understand what the need for cloud was, what the strategic intent was, how we were going to do it, and then to build out essentially portfolios of content for our, not so much all of our cloud people who were learning cloud as their primary skill set, but for all of our teams that were touched by cloud in the role that they did. So it started life as a cloud academy. It was all cloud focused. And then on, I would say probably April of last year, we refocused it to be the skills center, and cloud became one of what we call our skills pillars.
Yeah. I want to get back to a little bit about which teams are using it in a moment, but you're referencing cloud, and I want to tell everybody who is listening in, you are not alone in that. We actually saw an 1,185% increase in Pluralsight skills clouds labs that were taken last year. And we've seen, the total of hands-on labs taken grew by 24%. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that, every organization is trying to create new cloud experts, to the sense that 2 years in a row now, Intro to Cloud Computing has been the most watched cloud related course. So just that initial step into
absolutely.
Okay, we need to know this. And it's not just one business function. It's everything from manufacturing to finance to public service. You are not alone there. People are looking and needing to know how to get started into the cloud. So you were mentioning a little bit, touch on a little bit of who is using the service, but can you kind of dive into what teams are kind of using the product currently?
Currently, we've
Yeah.
got well, we've got 7 what we call skills pillars launched
Mhm.
within enterprise, and each skills pillar then draws on content from Pluralsight. So we've got everything from, as you've mentioned, cloud,
Yeah.
and that itself touches on many different teams within enterprise, because it's not just our cloud architects or our cloud specialists who are working on it. It's also our sales specialists. So we've got people in there with the sales specialist focus on cloud. But we've got people dipping in there for things like intelligent connectivity. We've got intelligent connectivity pathways under our pillar. We have data and AI. We have automation. So we've got an automation pillar that pulls on a lot of the automation content within Pluralsight. For the pathways for network automation, for RPA, robotic process automation.
Mhm.
And as we expand, Pluralsight can fill around about 95% of all of our technology learning.
Mhm. And it makes sense hearing about all the different unique ways that you guys need to learn, why you're doing the kind of bespoke learning pathways that you were talking about. But would you mind maybe expanding on that? Like how did you guys come to that decision to be like, okay, let's sharpen our focus on specifically what types of courses we want our teams to use? Because when people first look at a product like Pluralsight, they might actually think about it the other way around, where they can just say, we can give this to our teams and they can use whatever they need. But I really am interested, and I'm kind of fascinated on the fact that you guys have sort of turned it the other way around and said like, okay, but let's focus on these specific things. So can you kind of talk through those custom learning paths?
Yeah, absolutely. So the learners that we focus on, I suppose, let me play back the benefits first, and you'll understand why we've gone down that road. The
Mm-hmm.
benefits of having these bespoke learning pathways is that there's no ambiguity around what people should be learning for their role.
Mm.
And their role can either be driven by the need for an accredited technology. So there's a learning pathway that drives them down that road towards an accreditation,
Mm-hmm.
or it's a supplementary skill need that happens to be within their portfolio of learning. So to open up Pluralsight and then say, okay, so we know that you need, let's say, I'm going to use the example of CCNA or CCNP or CCIE on the Cisco track.
Mm-hmm.
There's your Pluralsight license, go away and learn it. The role that they've actually got has got more than just Cisco in there. So they might have Cisco, and they might have a bit of CloudWorks in there, and they might have a bit of cloud learning. So
Mm-hmm.
to give them a single point of contact for all of their learning, we build it into that learning pathway that sits on the skills center.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the benefit is there's no ambiguity around what people should be learning. And it helps people focus to get to that accredited status that they need at the end of their portfolio.
Yeah, I really love that, and I will say you guys aren't alone in when it comes to this concept that we actually saw last year. Custom learning paths sort of built around upgrading technology careers in general, and skills rose to a really high position in our kind of tracks and seeing what people were doing. And it's really clear that technologists in general, they're looking to learn new tools and execute on evolving initiatives, and but they're also looking for ways to advance their own careers, which I think is a really empowering thing for technologists in general. Speaking of that kind of custom flexibility, I'm a little curious for your company. Are you building in this learning time as a part of people's kind of day to day, or like, is there a flexibility in when people are taking courses? Obviously, that's something that a lot of technologists are wrestling with
Yeah.
currently.
So I mean, the ideal utopia for this would be that people actually set aside 2 hours a week or an afternoon a week.
Mm-hmm.
And in some instances, we do have that. And as we work with the SMEs and we work with the managers of the teams, we encourage it. I can't say it happens all the time,
Of
but we
course.
certainly encourage the adoption of a specific learning time where people can then just focus on that content and focus on it to the
Mm-hmm.
point where there's no distractions in there.
Mm-hmm. So what Are there any specific successes that you've seen from an upskilling or certification aspect that kind of jumps out at you?
Yeah, I think I would have to call out our first skills pillar after we'd launched the Cloud Academy. So
Mhm,
we'd launched the Cloud Academy. We then embedded the Cloud Academy within the Skills Center, and the first pillar after that was the security skills pillar.
mhm,
Feedback from the senior manager in that world was that on the adoption of the skills pillar within the team, they'd seen something like a 200% increase in both exams taken. And I wouldn't say a 200% increase in exams passed, but
yes.
certainly a 200% adoption of exams that is in a very accredited world is a
Mhm.
significant achievement for the team. So yeah, that was an absolute success.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I know you mentioned, you joined the company kind of as the COVID pandemic was sort of ongoing already, but
Yeah,
something we have noticed in our statistics since the beginning of the pandemic is that 271 Pluralsight skills courses saw an increase of 100% viewership. And just in general, there's 33% time that a 33% increase in time using these courses. So people are they are taking that time, like you mentioned, whether it's during work hours or I know personally, I love this type of stuff, so I find myself on a Saturday morning looking at it just because
absolutely.
it's available to me.
Those stats don't surprise me at all. And I
Mhm,
could echo some of the stats that we see on our regular reporting that
mhm.
the adoption is on the general increase. We're adding users in all the time. And as a result of that, that can kind of skew the figures sometimes, but generally we are seeing a more heavy adoption on a month by month basis.
Yeah. What does having these courses available to your teams, what does it enable you to accomplish that maybe you couldn't prior or that the company couldn't prior? Since I know that, when you came on board, they were already kind of using these tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, personally speaking, I'm a technologist from old. I sort of cut my tooth in the technology world,
Sure.
working for mobile networks in the UK. So when I used to do technology learning, it would always be a week, 2 weeks away in a hotel on a course, coming
Mhm,
back at weekends. And yeah, it was nice at the time, but looking back now, it was very, very expensive. For
mhm,
me, the benefit of Pluralsight is that it's an on-demand service.
mhm.
So people can take their learning when they need it, at the point of need, and then refer back to it as and when they decide they need to top up their skills, or if they've got a particular problem that they're trying to solve, they can dip back into the relevant piece of learning.
Mhm.
And that is absolutely a godsend for the teams that we've got at the moment. And
I love.
what I'm not saying, sorry,
Oh
Adam, what
no.
I'm not saying here is that face-to-face learning has not got a place in technology
Mhm.
learning. It absolutely has. Um, and that's one of the reasons why we love the labs that are on Pluralsight, is that it gives the people hands-on.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying about kind of those in person, like going off to a conference and stuff. I have a content marketing background. That's what I do for a living here at Pluralsight, and I know I get the same feeling when I go to like content marketing world, which is a very big conference here in the States. I go there for 4 or 5 days, and I watch all of these wonderful presentations, and I take all of these notes on all of these notebooks that you and I were talking about that I have sitting around me,
Yeah.
and I say, this is going to be so wonderful. I'm going to implement these 58 ideas that I've learned this week. And then you go back to your day-to-day job, and there's just a lot you have to do. And so it can be hard to fold those things in. Whereas with like Pluralsight, it's a tool where if you have someone who needs to learn something for a specific project, they can just go grab it on demand. They've learned it, and it's kind of seamlessly integrated into their day to day. This isn't even a question. This is more so just agreeing with you.
No, I totally hear you, and I agree with you on that. I'm totally.
Mhm,
Where we've got new starters coming into the business, they can adopt one of their learning pathways applicable to
mhm,
their area from day one. They don't have to wait for a course to come around, or a scheduled course to come into the diary. The
mhm,
moment they hit the ground running for their job that they're actually coming into the business for, the learning pathway supports them from day one through to mastery.
mhm. I know this might not be specifically your area of your day-to-day job, but do you think this has helped with talent retention for your company at all?
I think it's too early in our strategy to say that it's helped. but
Hmm.
it's certainly on one of the KPIs that I'm looking for.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think once we've got the saturation across enterprise with the learning pathways that we need, I think that will naturally come, and hopefully
Hmm.
it will be an attractor for tech
Yeah.
savvy people in the market to come to BT.
Yeah. The reason I ask is obviously something that's very, very heavy on every tech leader's mind is, we have the Great Resignation still ongoing. And we have some stats from the report where, employers are paying up to 250% of salaries for each replacement that they lose just because of the onboarding time and the process to find people. And, we've also seen that comparable, or, comparing that 250% of a salary number to the cost of upskilling a current employee, which is about $1,200 US. It's the ability to give your talent the skills for not only the job they're doing, but maybe the job that they want, which is like the next step up with your company. It can be so valuable for both the
Yeah,
employer and the employee.
absolutely. I mean,
Mhm.
as we evolve the skills center and as the talent initiatives within BT Enterprise evolve, the
Mhm.
next step for what we do is to link them into the career progression work and the career pathways, so that
Mhm.
you can see how your skill set is very similar to an adjacent skill set, and what do you need to do to get from A to B or A to D.
Yeah.
That's absolutely on the agenda.
Yeah, along those lines, we have an interesting question in the chat that I want to bring up now. They just asked it as we were having this conversation, and as if anyone joined us a little bit late, if you go into the chat on the bottom, you can ask any questions you want. And I also put a blueprint, or sorry, the 2022 forecast kind of report there as well, if you'd like to reference it. But the question is from Adam Morrison. He says, "What specific actions, if any, do senior leaders take to drive adoption or importance of Pluralsight learning? Is it tied to performance or incentive?" So feel free to answer that as in depth or kind of high level as you want. But I think that's a really interesting question.
So I guess paying incentives is the old carrot and stick approach.
Hmm.
Personally, for me, to get the adoption and to get the engagement, it's all about working with the senior managers and working with the teams and working with the SMEs to help them understand the benefit that not just Pluralsight, but our pathways brings them.
Hmm.
So from a manager perspective, the pathway build happens with the manager. The pathway launch happens with the learner, so that they're not just having this dumped onto them. And I suppose it's that from an engagement perspective, which has been so successful in the areas where we see success. Um, paying what was it? Paying performance incentives. Yeah, I don't know of any areas within BT Enterprise that are adopting the pay
Hmm.
and or incentives and performance model, but we certainly look at it from an engagement perspective around, we're as close to the teams as we possibly can,
Hmm.
not just the SMEs, not just the managers or the senior managers, but the actual learners themselves, so that they can see what we're doing.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense to me. And I will say, I know that you guys as an organization really focus on skills and pro serve, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But I will say, for people listening who are interested in these types of tools, Pluralsight has another product called Flow, which is kind of like a software delivery intelligence platform. And I will say, an interesting way to kind of tie all these things together is, if you have people who are taking these specific types of courses and you're working on adoption and, kind of showing these individual contributors the importance of these learnings. A really great way to do that is, if your company is using Flow, you can look at kind of their growth over time, how they're working on sprints over time, the different types of projects they're able to take on. And you can use those in one-on-ones and different types of things. But, it may not specifically say, if you take this course, you'll get a pay increase. But what it will say is, these courses are going to build up your skill set, and building up that skill set is going to, make you more valuable to the company, and you're going to be able to kind of take the next step in your career. So I would imagine it's kind of like a rising tide raises all ships type of a situation, where it's like, the better you're
That's a
able
good
to,
analogy.
yeah, it's like the better you're able to do your job, the better you'll do your job, I suppose, is an interesting way of saying it. That was,
Absolutely.
yeah, Adam, thank you. That was a really great question. I really appreciate it. Getting back to some of the questions I had sent you before that we're a little bit more prepared for. Would you mind talking to us a little bit about your company's cloud learning approach and kind of how Skills and Proster facilitates it? I know we kind of touched on it a little bit at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll rewind to when I first joined in the business. The whole approach to our cloud learning was the adoption of what was called at the time a cloud academy. And it was built using one of Pluralsight's skill strategists before I came into the business to really get under the skin of, as I said before, every team in the business, when I talk about business, I talk about enterprise, so the customer facing unit of enterprise. Every team within enterprise that was touched by cloud, in other words, they needed to know about it, interact with it, architect it, solutionize it, and build it, would be consulted around what their learning needs were to have not so much a pathway built, but a portfolio of learning that would take them through each of the three hyperscalers if necessary, or just one of the three hyperscalers. So we've got tracks that have got all three hyperscalers down to really low level technical detail that are 50 or 60 pieces of content long.
Mhm.
Now, that doesn't mean that everybody takes 50 or 60 pieces of content. What we've got are, let's say, a solution architect that works in the Azure space. They do the Azure learning within that portfolio.
Mhm.
But what we did do was, outside of the solution architects and the consultants and all of the people who live and breathe cloud as their day job, was we introduced the cloud skills into areas that were not typically touched by cloud. So your networking people, your sales specialists.
Mhm.
And to be fair, that's still an evolving beast. We are just moving learning pathways into the GCP space as we're starting to adopt GCP as our data platform.
Mhm.
So the cloud approach has always been one around understand the learning needs of the individual teams, portfolios of learning for the teams, but specifically focusing on the people who interact with any of the three hyperscalers on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm.
And they then are introduced to the real deep technical content that's needed for their roles.
Yeah, I love that. And I can say I have a little bit of real life experience with this type of idea, like you said, kind of having the salespeople also understanding this. My brother happens to also work for Pluralsight. He's a sales director, and he, much like me, comes from a communications background. He sold insurance for our father for a while. He's sold a million different things, but he is now working to become certified in some of the cloud courses that we have available for, I mean, obvious reasons for him. He needs to be able to sell the tool,
Mhm.
enable, and they need to be able to get about it. But I really do love, I think with so much of your data moving over to the cloud and so much of everything, that can be a completely foreign idea for a sales rep or somebody who, is in marketing like myself. But if you can understand it, if you can kind of take those introductory level aspects, I think it brings kind of the whole organization together. It kind of helps even create culture and bonding a little bit by being able to say, like, I have these
Absolutely.
questions. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, just a recent piece of work that we've done with our new partnership with Microsoft is that the pathways we've built, yes, they're very much focused on our capability to solutionize, architect, and build a solution. But we've also got the people who support it in life. And we've also got, as I mentioned before, the sales specialists are now going into some of the technical content
Mhm.
within the Azure tracks. So I suppose taking the technology further and further into the sales capability is going to
Mhm.
equip them to be more confident in the way that they talk about it.
Yeah, I love that. We have seen that um, there's this state of upskilling report that a cloud guru, who is now part of Pluralsight, did last year, and we found that 2/3 of the people that were uh, responded to all of the questions said that they are going to use upskilling as either 100% of their solution or a major part of their solution in this year and beyond, as opposed to bringing in new talent for cloud services and really just the entire upskilling process. So do you have has your corporate company began looking at what your plans are for the cloud in this year, but more importantly even beyond this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned, that we just signed a partnership with Microsoft,
Right.
which I'm not going to go into the great details of it, but
Totally fair.
essentially it's our go-to-market strategy around how we sell Microsoft to our customer base.
Hmm.
And it's the same as we're moving into the AWS world. We've got an AWS work stream kicking off that I'm supporting from a learning perspective. And as I mentioned already, the GCP initiative is more of an in-house, how we use data in-house.
Hmm.
The other two are outward focused into the customer world. But you mentioned A Cloud Guru. That's absolutely one of the things that's on our radar for 2022.
Hmm.
We're just in the process of scoping out what we need from A Cloud Guru amongst our, I suppose, upper echelon of technical skill sets. So we've got a Microsoft MVP within the organization who I'm working with at the moment to understand the ACG needs, A Cloud Guru needs, before we actually start coming to Pluralsight and saying this is how many we need. We want to make sure that we've got the right people tagged with ACG to be able to utilize it to its fullest.
Yeah, absolutely. For people who have joined late, I saw a couple of Q&A questions come through. Somebody else asked for the report link, which is why I put it in our chat one more time there. There's one more, there's another Q&A. It's not so much a question, but I believe in transparency, and they're giving us some lovely feedback for Pluralsight. So I'm going to say it here. So Ram just said, I'll never forget how Pluralsight helped me in my learning of IT skills. Everything I know today came from Pluralsight and CBT Nuggets. It would be nice if more in-depth and more practical scenario-based trainings would be available on databases, data science, AI, and BI on Pluralsight. I love that. I'm gonna, like I said, I
I
believe
think
in
great.
transparency. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
wanted to make sure I read that off because I didn't want it to go unnoticed. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna take that feedback.
what I would say to the person is make sure that you look at the Pluralsight labs that are on there. They're
Mhm.
very comprehensive. We just embedding a strategy to use the Pluralsight labs within the skills center. It gives you that hands-on capability. It gives you that practice that you need.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely echo everything that she said.
Yeah, I really love that. Have there been maybe some unexpected benefits that you hadn't expected when beginning to use Pluralsight? I mean, obviously people are saying like, well, we're going to upskill and we're going to improve all these different things, but have there been aspects that have been pleasant surprises for the organization?
I think the financial saving, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I've got to go around and say that the financial saving has been significant. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but it's one of
Yeah.
the things that, would I say it was unexpected? Not really, but it's
Mhm.
certainly given it's certainly been a good benefit.
Mhm.
Um, I think some of the feedback that we get around the skill center and Pluralsight adoption has given people that on demand.
Mhm.
And when we say on demand, it's not just about, let's say, a new starter joining the organization and able to follow a track. It could be an experienced engineer or technician or consultant or architect that's got to a point in the work that they're doing and they need then to refresh. So
Mhm.
having that ability to drop back into a piece of learning that they know's got the content that they're looking for is an absolute godsend, because going back to the days of sitting in a classroom, you can't dip back into that classroom 2 or 3 weeks later. It's just gone.
Well, and not only that, it can be, it can be really challenging to get into a classroom period in our current reality.
Well, there is that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. We've actually seen, I do want to give people some of these stats because they're really, really interesting. We asked a lot of questions about, with our Pluralsight kind of network of people, and we were curious. And 85% of managers think remote work is here to stay. And
Mhm.
we have courses that kind of align with remote and virtual types of things. We saw a 305% increase in viewership of our skills course, managing virtual teams. Some of these numbers are ridiculous, which is why I'm laughing.
Yeah.
One of them is, excuse me, 440% increase in the view time of make work from home work. And then we saw an 87% increase in viewership of technology leadership courses as a whole. And I think that's just really interesting because not only have we had to re-understand what leadership means with remote, and that's one of the reasons why this on-demand aspect of Pluralsight has been so huge, but there's also so many new leaders who are taking these types of things on for the first
Yeah.
time. Is that something that you guys have seen as having new leadership roll in because of all of this?
No, not personally.
Hmm.
I think, as I say, I came into BT during COVID.
Hmm.
I've actually done 3 different roles during COVID because I was contracting before I came in here. So seeing the adoption of COVID in one role and the leaders adopting a different stance to remote workers to the leaders adopting a remote working stance now is fundamentally different. I mean, the old adage of if you're remote, nobody can see what you were doing. There was a
Hmm.
big trust issue there. Nowadays, I feel that that trust issue has been got over and people
Hmm.
understand that you can be more productive, you can be, or just productive, or even more productive by the remote working that people adopt. And when I talk about remote working, I don't mean home working. I
Hmm.
mean the ability to work from wherever you need to, hybrid, remote, whatever you want to call it. It's not
Hmm.
just about sitting at home like I am at the moment in my office.
Hmm.
It's more a case of I could pick up my laptop and I can work from wherever. And I think leaders and senior leaders and executives recognize that now. And the trust issue, I think, has gone, or I hope it's gone, so
Hmm.
that people now can just be the most effective that they can be.
Yeah, well, and I think what you're describing are the good organizations, the like the best case scenarios where that trust isn't a problem. And I think those are the companies who are able to maintain their talent and they're able to keep these technologists on board
Absolutely.
because their teams know, okay, they're gonna enable me to work the schedule that works for me. They're gonna, enable me to get the things done that I need to get done. And we've seen, 34% of employees have said they feel their company lacks open and honest communication. But the way that I look at that is 2/3 of employees are saying that they do have good, open and honest communication. So I imagine that number probably wouldn't be that high a few years ago. So it
No,
is
it's
nice
definitely
that,
increased.
yeah, yeah, it's nice that leaders
Definitely.
are understanding. Okay, I have one more question for you. Does your organization report out on these courses and skills taken? And if so, what is the process for that for your org?
So we work in conjunction with our Pluralsight account manager to get the best from the platform.
Hmm.
Yes, we report from Pluralsight, but as I mentioned, we have a skill center which is not just Pluralsight content. So we have a different approach to the way that we do it.
Hmm.
Um, I have to say that we're not where we want to be with reporting at the moment, and that's because we've got multiple inputs. But from a Pluralsight perspective, we can report on Pluralsight, we can report on the adoption. We have priorities set on Pluralsight around the key technologies.
Hmm.
We've got team structures in place with managers so that we can identify a team that might not be engaged. We go to the manager, we then work with the manager to get the engagement scores up on that. The reporting and analytics engine from Pluralsight is pretty much a godsend for us. But
Hmm.
like I say, we work with the account manager to get some of the stats from the back end of Pluralsight that we can't get through the normal analytics tool.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. So we're gonna wrap up here just a little bit. I'm gonna do a couple of quick CTAs for everybody, but you can ask if anyone has any other questions, go ahead and put them in the chat now, and we'll ask before we hop off. But I do want to let everyone know if you haven't had a chance to click on that report that I put through in our chat, definitely do that. Whether it's just to bookmark it for later, or to dive into it right now. One of the main reasons is if you get to the bottom of it. We do have these really wonderful blueprints that are available. And, the purpose of those is to give you an action item at the end of reading a report. Having data is wonderful. Having a plan with that data is
Absolutely.
essential. Yeah. So
Yeah.
at the bottom of that report, you'll see these blueprints, and they're going to enable you to map out milestones, set progress goals for your teams, kind of create that plan. So definitely check that out. And then when we send you a follow-up email, you will see some additional really great reporting and things available. So mostly and firstly, Neil, thank you so much for taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. It's been wonderful to speak. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you to everyone who joined us